Our world was built on secrets wrestled from the earth itself. Long before steel and silicon, the first engineers faced nature's raw power with nothing but observation and ingenuity. They looked at a shifting hillside and saw a stable home. They studied a flooding river and designed a lifeline. This is the story of how humanity mastered earth, water, and wind, turning chaotic elements into the foundations of civilization. By the end, you will understand the hidden blueprints of survival that allowed ancient societies to not just endure, but to flourish in impossible places. How did they move mountains of stone without modern machinery? What forgotten wisdom kept desert cities cool for millennia? Their greatest triumphs whisper of a harmony with nature we are only now relearning. What do you believe was our ancestors' most astonishing leap of faith? The ground beneath their feet was the first and greatest puzzle. For nomadic groups, the earth was a temporary bed, but to build a lasting home, to plant a field that would feed generations, they needed permanence. And the land itself seemed to resist. Soft soil could swallow a post hole overnight. A gentle hillside, when the rains came, could become a river of mud, sliding down to bury everything in its path. The very ground that offered stability could, without warning, become a grave. So they learned to listen to the earth, to read its subtle language. They noticed how certain clays held together when packed, while other soils crumbled at a touch. They saw how rock formations anchored the landscape, and how the angle of a slope told a story of water and time. This was not mere digging, it was the birth of a profound partnership. Their first great innovation against this instability seems almost simple in hindsight, yet it reshaped continents: terracing. By cutting a series of flat steps into a hillside, they did more than create farmland. They invented a way to argue with gravity itself. Each terrace wall, built from stones carefully fitted together, acted as a brace holding the soil in place. It stopped the relentless creep of erosion, captured precious rainwater, and transformed barren, sliding slopes into fertile, productive gardens. This was the humble origin of geotechnics, the science of how Earth behaves. They learned through trial and immense effort that the ground must be understood, not just occupied. Every stone they laid, every slope they reshaped, was a quiet declaration that humanity would no longer be at the mercy of the land, but would begin patiently to negotiate with it. But to truly stay in one place, they needed more than just stable ground. They needed walls. And here, the first engineers revealed a genius for transformation. They took the very earth that threatened to slide away and convinced it to stand up, to become shelter. In the river valleys of Mesopotamia and the high plains of Anatolia, this process began with a simple, profound act of alchemy. A builder would gather soil, often right from the site, mix it with water and a handful of chopped straw for strength, then pack this damp mixture into wooden frames. Layer by patient layer, they would ram it down with heavy tools, compressing it into a solid, dense mass. When the frame was removed, what remained was not just a pile of dirt, but a wall. This was rammed earth, architecture born from patience and pressure. The principle was so effective it inspired another innovation, one that traded time for portability. Instead of building the wall in place, they would shape that same earthen mixture into uniform blocks and let the sun bake them solid. These were Adobe bricks, the world's first modular building units. What seems like a simple step was a revolution in efficiency. Bricks could be made in the dry season, stockpiled, and then assembled rapidly when the time was right. But the real magic of these earth walls was not just their strength, it was their intelligence. These builders intuitively understood thermal mass. The thick, dense earth absorbed the heat of the scorching daytime sun slowly, keeping the interior spaces remarkably cool. Then, as the chill of night descended, that stored warmth would radiate back inward, gently tempering the cold. Their homes became natural climate batteries, charged and discharged by the rhythm of the sun itself. We can still walk among the echoes of this mastery. In central Turkey, the ancient settlement of Satalhiruk rises from the plain, a sprawling honeycomb of mud brick homes built nearly 9,000 years ago. There were no grand palaces here, no temples of stone, just community upon community of earthen dwellings, their walls still standing after hundreds of generations. This was not mere survival, it was the creation of enduring society from the most humble of materials. They had learned to ask the earth not just for food, but for fellowship, transforming its substance into the very fabric of their shared world. And if Earth could be persuaded to provide shelter and stability, what then of its restless counterpart, the element that refused to be held at all? Yet for all the ingenuity of building up from the earth, there existed another, more daring form of mastery. It was the art of subtraction. While some cultures were learning to make the earth stand, others were learning to ask it to open. They looked at a solid cliff face or a soft volcanic plateau, and saw not a barrier, but a blank canvas for an architecture of profound shelter. This was the birth of subterranean engineering, a practice that required a deep, almost intuitive conversation with the very bones of the planet. To carve a home from living rock is to trust the mountain itself. It demands an intimate knowledge of geology, an understanding of which layers are stable, which might crumble, and where the natural weaknesses lie. The earliest rock-cut architects did not have modern surveying tools. They learned by reading the landscape, by observing cracks and strata, and by developing techniques that turned nature's own forces into their allies. In places like Cappadocia, in what is now Turkey, they worked with a soft stone called tuff, formed from ancient volcanic ash. Here, they perfected a method as clever as it was simple. To create a new room, they would first light a fire against the rock face, heating it intensely. Then they would dash cold water against the scorched surface. The sudden, violent contraction caused the rock to fracture and split, allowing them to pry away large chunks with basic tools. It was a process of thermal shock, using fire and water as their chisels. But these were not just dark, cramped holes in the ground. The underground cities of Cappadocia, some descending 8 levels deep, reveal a breathtaking sophistication. They were designed as self-contained worlds, complete with ventilation shafts that reached up to the surface to provide fresh air, even hundreds of feet below. They had ingenious water collection and filtration systems, stables for livestock, communal kitchens, and places of gathering. Every corridor, every step, was a calculated decision in rock, a testament to planning that considered airflow, structural integrity, and community life for generations. Far across the world, in the American Southwest, the ancestral pueblones of Mesa Verde performed a similar feat of reverse engineering. They built not down into the earth, but into its sheer cliffs, constructing entire villages within the grand, south-facing alcoves of canyon walls. These cliff dwellings were marvels of environmental adaptation. The overhanging rock provided a natural roof, shielding them from snow and rain. The south-facing orientation captured the low winter sun for warmth, while the deep recesses remained cool in the summer heat. They used the Earth's own geometry as their primary defense and their primary climate control system. This practice of excavation, of creating space by removal, represents a different kind of harmony. It is a philosophy that seeks not to impose a new structure upon the land, but to reveal a structure that is already latent within it. The mastery of Earth was not a one-way street of construction. It was a dialogue. Sometimes the answer was to pile material high, to build a wall or a tower. And sometimes the wisest, most stable solution was to listen and to carefully, reverently dig. But Earth could be more than a home. It could also be a canvas for the impossible. Across the globe, our ancestors performed acts of construction that still defy easy explanation. They looked at single stones the size of small houses and asked, "How do we make this move?" The answer was not magic, but a deep, intuitive grasp of physics, a silent conversation between human ingenuity and the stubborn weight of the world. To transport a megalith, a great stone, across miles of uneven terrain required a kind of collective geometry. They understood that dragging was easier than carrying, and that sliding could be easier than dragging. One of the most widespread techniques involved the use of wooden rollers. A team would place a series of freshly cut logs in front of a massive stone slab resting on a wooden sledge. As the sledge was pulled forward by ropes, the logs would roll beneath it. The moment a roller emerged from the back, a worker would rush it to the front, creating a continuous, moving track. It was a slow, rhythmic dance of coordination, where the earth itself became a temporary road made of timber. For truly monumental stones, or for lifting them into position, the earthen ramp became their greatest tool. By building a sloping mound of packed soil and rubble right up to the intended height of a wall, they transformed an impossible vertical lift into a manageable, gradual incline. Teams could then haul the stone up this artificial hill, a testament to the power of reshaping the landscape to serve a single, awe-inspiring purpose. The iconic stone circles of places like Stonehenge stand as the final result of this staggering logistical chain. Each of those towering sarsen stones, weighing up to 25 tons, was likely hauled over 20 miles from its quarry. The journey required not just muscle, but meticulous social organization, route planning, and an unspoken trust in shared effort. Yet the mastery did not end with placement. The precise orientation of these stones reveals a second layer of genius. The builders aligned their creations with the solstice sun and the cycles of the moon. This was engineering in service of cosmology. By anchoring colossal stones into the earth with celestial precision, they were building a permanent bridge between the terrestrial and the cosmic, a physical model of their understanding of the universe's order. This dual achievement, moving mountains of rock and locking them into a dialogue with the heavens, represents one of humanity's most profound declarations. It stated that we could not only negotiate with the Earth's substance, but also choreograph its relationship with the sky above. Yet water remained the ultimate paradox. It gave life, and it could take everything away in an instant. A gentle river that nourished crops for years could, in a season of relentless rain, swell into a monstrous force, sweeping away homes, fields, and entire seasons of labor. For the first engineers, mastering water was not a choice. It was the very definition of civilization itself. Their survival depended on solving a fluid enigma: how to invite this vital element in while knowing precisely when and how to ask it to leave. This began with the most fundamental observation, the rhythm of the seasons and the lay of the land. They noticed how rainwater gathered in gullies, how snowmelt traced the same paths down a mountainside year after year. Their first interventions were elegantly simple: a shallow trench dug to guide a trickle toward a thirsty field, a low wall of stones and earth to nudge a stream's course just slightly. These were the first dialogues with a flowing landscape, a way of suggesting a new direction to the water rather than commanding it. But suggestion soon grew into sophisticated persuasion. In the arid landscapes of the Fertile Crescent, the need was absolute. Here, the great rivers like the Tigris and Euphrates were lifelines, but their water was useless if it remained confined to the riverbed. The solution was a network of canals branching out from the main channel like veins from an artery. Digging these canals was a monumental communal effort, a reshaping of the earth on a grand scale to create a new, human-made watershed. This was irrigation, the deliberate sharing of a river's bounty across miles of dry land. It turned desert margins into gardens, supporting populations that could never have survived on rainfall alone. Yet the engineers of the ancient world understood that water was not just for nourishment. it was also a source of pure, harnessable power. The water mill, a later but profound innovation, captured this idea perfectly. By channeling a portion of a stream's flow to turn a large wooden wheel, they translated the constant, relentless energy of moving water into a grinding force for grain or a pounding force for forging. It was one of humanity's first steps toward automating work, using the environment itself as a tireless engine. This relationship with water reached its most awe-inspiring scale in flood management. Societies like those along the Yellow River in China lived under the constant shadow of catastrophic flooding. Their response was not just to build walls, but to think in systems. They constructed massive, graduated dikes and spillways, designed not to hold back every drop of water, but to manage its excess, to give the river a safe place to expand during its furious seasons. This was an acknowledgement that water could not be truly controlled, only respectfully and intelligently guided. The greatest testament to this hydraulic genius might be found far to the west, in the heart of the Roman Empire. The Roman aqueduct was not merely a water delivery system, it was a declaration of intent over geography. By building channels that maintained a precise, gentle slope across dozens of miles, often carried on towering arches over valleys, Roman engineers performed a kind of magic. They made water flow uphill by persuasion, not force, using gravity's own rules to bring fresh mountain springs directly into the center of their bustling cities. Each of these systems, from the humble village ditch to the soaring arcade of an aqueduct, shared a common foundation, a deep, almost intimate reading of the natural world. They required observing where water wanted to go, and then designing a path that served both its nature and human need. It was a partnership built on patience and profound insight, turning the chaos of a storm or the randomness of a river's path into a predictable, life-sustaining rhythm. The Roman aqueduct stands as a silent argument against the landscape itself. Its elegant arcades of stone march across valleys and plains, not as a barrier, but as a bridge for life's most essential element. To look at one is to witness the conquest of gravity through sheer, patient intelligence. The goal was audacious: to capture fresh, clean water from mountain springs dozens of miles away and deliver it by its own flow directly into the heart of a thirsty metropolis. This was not about pumping or lifting, but about persuasion. It required a mastery of slope so precise it feels almost impossible. Roman surveyors, using simple tools like the groma and chorobates, would map a route with a gradient often as slight as 1 foot of drop for every 200 feet of distance. Over 50 miles, that meant calculating a fall of just a few hundred feet. A margin of error so tiny that a single miscalculation would leave the water stagnant and useless. They were drawing a line across the empire, a line that water would willingly follow. When a deep valley interrupted this perfect line, the engineers faced a choice. They could build a towering, expensive bridge, or they could employ a brilliant trick of physics, the inverted siphon. They would construct a sealed stone pipeline that plunged down the valley's side, crossed the bottom in a reinforced channel, and then climbed up the opposite slope. Because the outlet was lower than the inlet, the tremendous pressure created by the weight of the water in the descending leg would force it up and over the far side, all without a single pump. It was a daring application of natural force, a way to make water push itself uphill. But bringing water was only half the battle, it also had to be clean. Before entering the city, the flow would be channeled into large settling tanks, where sand and sediment would slowly drift to the bottom. This simple, effective purification was a quiet acknowledgement of public health, an early understanding that mastering water meant safeguarding the community it served. These structures were far more than utilities. They were the ultimate symbols of civic order and technological triumph. The constant, reliable flow from 100 distant hills into public fountains, baths, and private homes was a daily, visible promise of Roman civilization. It meant sanitation, leisure, industry, and life itself, all delivered on a scale never before imagined. The aqueduct demonstrated that to truly master water was to master the very gradient of the land, to convince geography itself to serve human need. It turned the chaotic, random paths of rivers and springs into a disciplined, rational network, a hydraulic blueprint written across the empire. This monumental achievement, however, addressed only one facet of water's character. It tamed its distribution, but what of its more elusive, invisible power, the force that could turn a millstone or fill a sail? If engineers could make water walk across continents, could they also convince the very air to work for them? While Roman engineers built monuments to water in plain sight, a different kind of genius was at work in the heart of the Persian desert, one that operated in whispers and shadows. Here, the sun was a tyrant, evaporating any exposed water before it could reach a field. The challenge was not to move water across a valley, but to hide it from the sky itself. The solution was the Qanat, a masterpiece of subterranean persuasion that did not conquer the landscape, but conversed with its deepest secrets. It began with a search for the Earth's hidden veins. Skilled surveyors, known as muqannis, would journey to the foothills of mountains, searching for signs of a subterranean aquifer. They looked for lines of greener vegetation or specific damp-loving plants, reading the surface like a map to the water below. Once a source was found, the real work, a work of immense faith and precision, would begin. Far down the slope, in the dry plains where the community lived, they would dig a mother well, a vertical shaft plunging deep into the earth. From its base, teams of diggers would begin tunneling backward toward the distant mountain aquifer, following a gradient so slight it was felt more than seen. This underground channel, wide enough for a single person to crawl through, was the Qanat's artery, but its brilliance lay in the series of vertical shafts dug at regular intervals along the tunnel's entire length. These were not for water, but for air, for the removal of excavated earth, and most importantly, for the builders themselves. They served as a precise surveying guide, allowing the muqannis to constantly check their alignment and slope by lowering weighted cords, ensuring the tunnel never rose too high or dipped too low. For miles, this hidden river would flow, completely shielded from the evaporating sun, guided only by gravity's gentle pull. When it finally emerged into the open air at the village, it did so not as a torrent, but as a steady, reliable spring, a miracle summoned from the depths. The Qanat did not just deliver water, it created an entire ecosystem. Its exit point became a vibrant oasis, a communal garden of orchards and crops flourishing in the desert's heart. The vertical shafts, once construction was complete, became natural cooling towers, pulling fresh air down into the tunnel and creating a passive refrigeration system for storing food. This was engineering as a form of deep listening. It required an understanding of hidden geology, of gravity's subtle rules over great distances, and of the community's long-term rhythm. A single Qanat could take generations to complete, its maintenance and care passed down like a sacred trust. For centuries, these silent, flowing veins sustained civilizations in places where surface life seemed impossible. They mastered water not by imposing a new order upon the land, but by discovering and gently following an order that was already there, a hidden blueprint for survival written in stone and groundwater. It was a dialogue with the planet conducted entirely in the dark, a testament to the patience of those who knew that sometimes the most powerful forces are the ones you never see. A river's gift could also be its curse. In the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates, and along the life-giving Indus, communities faced a paradox of abundance. The annual floods brought water and rich silt, but they arrived with chaotic force, drowning fields one year and receding too quickly the next, leaving behind cracked earth and failed crops. To survive here was to enter into a long-term negotiation with the river's temperament. The solution was a new kind of landscape, one drawn by human hands onto the floodplain itself. They began to etch the earth with channels, creating vast geometric networks of canals that branched out from the main river like the veins on a leaf. This was irrigation on a monumental scale, and it demanded more than just digging. It required a society to think as one. Surveyors, using simple sighting poles and levels, had to map the gentle, consistent slope of each canal over miles of terrain. A mistake of a few inches could mean stagnant water or destructive erosion, but the water's journey was only the beginning. As it flowed, it carried suspended silt, a blessing for soil fertility but a threat to the system itself. Left unchecked, this sediment would settle and choke the very channels designed to sustain life. So the early hydraulic engineers became masters of silt management. They designed canals with calculated curves and wider basins where the water's speed would drop, allowing the precious silt to settle out in controlled areas before the clearer water continued on. They built weirs, low barriers across the channels, to raise water levels and divert flow into smaller ditches, and they devised sluice gates, primitive but effective valves made of wood or stone, that could be raised or lowered to precisely regulate how much water entered each farmer's field. This was the birth of distributive justice in engineering, a way to ensure the river's gift was shared equitably across the community. The ability to command this flow did more than grow barley and dates, it grew power. Control over the canals meant control over life itself. Those who organized the digging, maintained the gates, and settled disputes over water allocation naturally ascended to positions of authority. This was the hydraulic society, where political structure and technological necessity became inseparable. The shared labor of managing water forged a social contract, binding individuals to a collective purpose far greater than any one harvest. It was a delicate, continuous dance with the river's seasonal moods, turning its unpredictable deluges into a reliable, metered rhythm of cultivation that could feed cities of tens of thousands. This intricate partnership with flowing water represented perhaps the most profound peace our ancestors ever brokered with nature, a treaty written not on parchment, but etched across the very skin of the earth. The wind whispered secrets that only the patient could hear. It was the most elusive of the ancient elements, a force without form, a power that could not be held in a hand or trapped in a cistern. To master wind was to engage in a conversation with the invisible, to build machines that argued with the very breath of the sky. Unlike earth or water, you could not dig a trench for the wind to follow. Its energy existed only in the moment it brushed past you, a fleeting strength that had to be captured and converted instantly or lost forever. This fundamental challenge sparked one of humanity's earliest leaps into the realm of pure physics, into the principles of aerodynamics and mechanical conversion. The first step was not to harness the wind but to negotiate with it. Farmers in open plains watched how the wind scoured their soil and dried their seedlings. Their solution was the windbreak, a simple row of trees or a woven fence that disrupted the airflow. This was a subtle act of persuasion, not capture. By placing a barrier, they created a zone of calm air behind it, a sheltered microclimate where crops could grow. It was an early lesson in how to reshape the wind's influence without ever stopping its flow. But true mastery demanded more than deflection, it demanded conversion. The sail was perhaps the most elegant early answer. By hoisting a broad sheet of woven fabric, mariners did not fight the wind, they invited it to become a partner. They learned to angle their sails, to trim them, to use the wind's pressure not just to push them forward, but to pull them at angles, even against the apparent direction of the breeze. This was applied aerodynamics in its purest form, turning an invisible, directionless force into directed motion across vast oceans. On land, the same principle took a more stationary, but no less revolutionary form. The first windmills emerged from a simple need to grind grain without the back-breaking labor of hand mills or the geographic limitation of a water wheel. Their genius lay in their aerodynamic design. The early Persian windmills, for instance, featured vertical sails made of bundled reeds or woven panels. These were arranged around a central vertical shaft, and the entire structure was enclosed in a brick housing with directional vents. The design funneled the wind from any direction onto one set of sails, causing the central shaft to rotate. It was a machine that listened to the wind from all sides. Later, the horizontal axis windmill, with its familiar four-bladed design, represented a deeper understanding. The sails were not flat boards but carefully shaped surfaces, slightly angled and curved like a bird's wing. As the wind flowed over these curved surfaces, it created a difference in pressure, pulling the blade around with greater efficiency than a simple push. This was the principle of lift, the same force that allows an airplane to fly, discovered and utilized centuries before the science behind it was formally understood. Building these machines required an intimate knowledge of local wind patterns. A windmill's placement was a decision based on generations of observation, of noting the seasonal gusts, the prevailing directions, and the way wind accelerated over a hill or through a valley. The millwright had to align the entire structure to this invisible map, ensuring its sails would meet the wind's full force. Once spinning, that rotational energy traveled through a series of wooden gears, a symphony of interlocking teeth that translated the fast, relatively weak spin of the sails into the slow, powerful torque needed to turn a heavy millstone. This gearing was the heart of the conversion, a mechanical language that translated the wind's language into useful work. Mastering the wind meant unlocking a power source that demanded no forests be cut for fuel, no rivers be diverted from their course. It was pure reciprocity with the atmosphere, a way to borrow from the sky's endless, restless motion to bake bread, pump water, or saw timber. It was the final piece in the ancient engineer's triad, proving that even the most intangible force, if observed with enough care and met with enough ingenuity, could be persuaded to build the world. The open ocean was the final and most formidable frontier. For generations, the sea had been a boundary, a vast, trackless expanse of salt and storm that swallowed the horizon. To look upon it was to face the ultimate test of human ingenuity, a challenge that demanded not just building something on the land, but building something that could survive the land's absence. The solution emerged from a marriage of two mastered elements, the persuasive power of the wind and the stubborn resistance of water. It began with a simple, terrifying act of faith, the first time a person stood in a hollowed log, raised a woven mat against the sky, and felt the invisible hand of the wind begin to pull. This was not just transportation, it was a new kind of conversation with the planet. The sail was the key, but its power was useless without a deep, intuitive understanding of the forces at play. Early boat builders quickly learned that a flat sheet catching the wind would only push them roughly downwind. To truly navigate, to sail across or even against the wind's direction, required a more sophisticated partnership. They discovered through endless experimentation that by angling the sail and shaping it slightly, it acted less like a pushed wall and more like a wing. The wind flowing over the curved surface created a difference in pressure, pulling the vessel forward with a force called lift. This principle, the same one that allows a modern airplane to fly, was being harnessed on the open water millennia before it was given a name. But capturing the wind's energy was only half the battle. The water itself resisted this forward motion, creating a drag that could spin a boat in circles or hold it dead in the water. The answer lay beneath the waves in the invention of the keel. This fixed, fin-like structure extending deep below the hull performed a silent, vital function. It acted as a lever in the water, counteracting the wind's sideways push on the sail and converting that lateral force into forward momentum. It was the anchor that allowed the wind to become a partner in direction, not just a source of chaotic shoving. With this understanding, two ancient cultures turned the world's oceans into their domain. The Phoenicians, masters of the Mediterranean, built sleek, cedar-hulled trading vessels with square sails. They mapped the predictable seasonal winds, like the steady northerlies of summer, using them as maritime highways to establish trade networks from the Levant to the Atlantic coast of Africa. Their voyages were calculated ventures of commerce and connection. Far across the globe, the Polynesian navigators achieved something even more breathtaking. Aboard their double-hulled voyaging canoes, they embarked upon deliberate journeys of discovery across the Pacific, the largest ocean on Earth. Without compasses or written charts, they read a living map written in the stars, the swell patterns of the waves, the flight paths of birds, and the subtle shifts in wind. They mastered the art of sailing against the prevailing trade winds on outward journeys, knowing that those same steady winds would reliably bring them home. This was navigation as a deep ecological dialogue, a way of listening to the ocean and the sky until they revealed their paths. The mastery of sail transformed the human story. It turned the sea from an impassable barrier into the planet's greatest connective tissue. Ideas, languages, crops, and technologies could now ride the wind across continents, weaving separate strands of human experience into a more interconnected whole. It was the culmination of ancient engineering, a final proof that by understanding the fundamental forces of earth, water, and wind, humanity could not only survive its environment, but could set out to discover its entire world. The steady rotation of a windmill's sails is a kind of quiet argument with the air itself. In the arid plains of ancient Persia and later the flat landscapes of medieval Europe, these structures rose not as monuments but as working partners with the sky. They represented a pivotal leap, the moment humanity began to mechanize nature itself, to build a machine that could translate the wind's restless energy into the slow, deliberate work of survival. This was not about capturing the wind in a single, dramatic gust, but about convincing it to perform a steady, reliable duty day after day. The challenge was profound, for the wind is a fickle collaborator, changing its strength and mind without warning. The early engineers answered this with elegant mechanical diplomacy. They crafted sails that could be adjusted, their angles fine-tuned by the miller to catch a gentle breeze or trimmed to withstand a gale. This was an ongoing conversation, a manual optimization for the mood of the day. But capturing the wind's spin was only the beginning. The true ingenuity lay in the heart of the mill, in a symphony of wooden gears. These interlocking teeth performed a crucial translation, taking the fast, relatively weak rotation of the sails and converting it into the slow, immense torque needed to grind wheat between heavy stones or to drive a piston pump deep into a well. It was a physical language that turned the wind's whisper into the crushing of grain or the lifting of water. This liberation from pure human or animal muscle power cannot be overstated. A single windmill tended by one family could produce enough flour to feed an entire village, freeing countless hands for other tasks. It demonstrated that the invisible could be made tangible, that an element which could not be held could be persuaded to hold up an entire community. The windmill stood as a testament to a new kind of relationship with the natural world, one based not on taking, but on a continuous, reciprocal exchange with the very atmosphere. The mastery of wind extended far beyond sails and mills, reaching into the very walls of a home. In the searing heat of a Persian desert, the most ingenious climate control system required no fuel, no moving parts, and made not a sound. It was a tower of baked brick rising from a flat roof, its face open to the prevailing wind. This was the Badgir, the wind catcher, and it was a masterpiece of architectural aerodynamics. Its design was deceptively simple, yet born from a deep, intuitive grasp of physics. The tower captured the cooler, faster-moving breezes that travel above the hot ground and funneled them down a central shaft. But the true magic happened inside. As that incoming air descended, it would often pass over a small indoor pool of water or moist clay jars. The evaporation from this surface would cool the air further, creating a refreshing draft that swept through the living quarters below. Meanwhile, the sun-baked walls of the home would heat the stale air inside, causing it to rise. This warm air would escape through opposite openings in the tower or through other designed vents, creating a constant, silent circulation. The entire house became a lung, breathing in coolness and exhaling heat. This was not an invention of force, but of invitation, a way of asking the wind to please come inside and stay a while. The same principles of passive guidance were at work a world away. In the villas of ancient Rome and Greece, architects designed not just for beauty, but for breadth. They oriented courtyards and arranged rooms to exploit seasonal breezes. Large windows placed opposite each other allowed for cross-ventilation, while shaded colonnades and interior gardens created pockets of cooler, still air. Water features in atriums added moisture to the air, providing a natural respite from the dry summer heat. These were homes engineered for comfort centuries before the concept of air conditioning, each layout a careful study in pressure and flow. This architectural intelligence reveals a deeper truth about our ancestors' relationship with the elements. Mastery was not always about domination or extraction. Sometimes the highest form of engineering was simply understanding a natural process so completely that you could build a doorway for it, step aside, and let it perform its work. It was a collaboration with the climate, a silent pact written in brick and stone that turned the wind itself into a willing servant of daily life. A true master does not play a single instrument, but conducts the entire orchestra. The pinnacle of ancient engineering was not the control of earth, water, or wind alone, but the breathtaking symphony created when all three were woven together. The most monumental works humanity has ever produced stand as testaments to this integrated genius, where the solution to one elemental challenge was found in the clever application of another. This was systems thinking carved in stone, a holistic vision that transformed raw survival into lasting legend. Nowhere is this synergy more visible or more staggering than in the silent, sun-bleached majesty of the Great Pyramid of Giza. To build such a structure was to engage in a continuous, multi-layered negotiation with every force of nature. It began, of course, with the earth. Teams quarried millions of limestone blocks from nearby plateaus, using simple tools and an intimate knowledge of the stone's grain to pry each massive piece free. But then came the impossible question: how do you move a 2-ton block of stone across miles of sand and rock to the rising construction site? The answer may have flowed in from the river. While theories abound, a compelling idea suggests they mastered water to move earth. By wetting the sand in front of wooden sledges, they dramatically reduced friction. The water acted not as a lubricant between the sledge and the sand, but as a temporary binding agent, causing the grains of sand to stick together and preventing them from piling up in front of the runners. This simple act, pouring water onto the desert, could have cut the pulling force required by half, turning an arduous haul into a manageable task. It was a brilliant parley, using the precious gift of the Nile to conquer the stubborn weight of the plateau. Within the growing structure itself, another elemental dialogue was essential: the need for air. The deep, cramped interior chambers and long, ascending passageways would have been stifling, filled with dust and the heat of laborers' breath. Ventilation was a matter of safety and practicality. The builders likely engineered their massive earthen construction ramps and the pyramid's own internal geometry to channel the desert winds, creating a flow of fresh air to the workers deep within the stone heart. They were designing with the wind, using its path to sustain the very effort of construction, and when the final capstone was set, the pyramid's form itself spoke to a celestial harmony. Its precise sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with minute accuracy, anchoring it to the Earth's axis, while its shape has been interpreted as a stone ramp for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to the stars, capturing the essence of wind and spirit. This was not just a tomb, it was a machine of cosmology built from a deep conversation with material reality. The pyramid stands as the ultimate icon of integrated mastery, where earth provided the material, water eased the transport, wind sustained the builders, and the completed form reached for the heavens. It represents the moment survival technology transcended itself, ascending into the realm of eternal cultural symbol. In such works, we see the ancient engineer's final, most profound lesson, that true power lies not in conquering the elements, but in listening to their relationships and building in the resonant space between them. But the most audacious act of engineering was not to move mountains or redirect rivers, but to build a city where solid ground refused to exist. In the shallow, shifting lagoon of the northern Adriatic, a group of refugees looked upon a landscape of mud, marsh, and tidal uncertainty and saw a future. They did not choose this place for its bounty, but for its defensive isolation, a sanctuary from the turmoil of the mainland. Their survival, however, demanded a miracle of foundation. The ground here was not ground at all, but a treacherous soup of soft silt and peat, utterly incapable of supporting the weight of a simple hut, let alone a metropolis of marble and stone. To build Venice was to engage in a centuries-long argument with liquidity itself, a project that began not with architecture, but with a profound act of subterranean persuasion. The solution was as simple in concept as it was staggering in scale. The Venetian engineers became masters of the pile, the long, pointed timber stake. They selected alder wood, a species naturally resistant to water decay, and began to drive these wooden spears by the thousands deep into the unstable lagoon bed. Teams of workers using heavy manual pile drivers would hammer each log down through the soft silt, layer by waterlogged layer, until it finally struck the Caranto, a deep, compacted stratum of clay far below. This was not a foundation in the traditional sense, it was a forest of wood planted upside down. On this submerged grid of tightly packed pilings, they would lay horizontal platforms of larch and oak, creating a rigid, submerged raft. Only upon this artificial, human-made island would they begin to place stone. The genius was in the material's interaction with its environment. Contrary to what one might expect, the constant immersion in oxygen-poor water and silt preserved the wood, petrifying it over centuries into a stone-like permanence. They had turned the very element that threatened to dissolve their city into its ultimate preservative, but a stable platform was only the beginning. The water that surrounded them was both their street and their greatest adversary. They mastered its dual nature through a network of canals that served as arteries for transport and, crucially, as a hydraulic management system. They understood the tides, designing the city's lowest points, its campi or squares, to flood in a controlled manner during high water, a natural pressure release that protected the structural integrity of the buildings. They even learned to manage the lagoon's salinity, using cleverly placed barriers and inlets to ensure a mix of fresh and salt water that prevented stagnation and supported the delicate marine ecosystem that was their buffer against the open sea. Venice is not a city built on water, it is a city built with water in a continuous, dynamic partnership. Every palace that reflects in the Grand Canal, every bridge that arches over a quiet Rio, stands upon that hidden, petrified forest. It is the ultimate testament to adaptive mastery, a living lesson that civilization does not require firm ground as a starting gift, but can, through deep understanding and relentless ingenuity, weave stability from the very fabric of instability itself. This was engineering as an act of faith in process, a declaration that the interaction between Earth's hidden solidity and water's restless flow could, if guided with enough patience, literally create new ground for the human story to unfold. Deep within the sun-scorched plains of India, a different kind of pyramid was built, one that descended into the earth rather than reaching for the sky. This was the stepwell or baoli, and it stands as perhaps the most elegant synthesis of all the ancient masteries. It was not a monument to a single ruler, but a profound gift to an entire community, born from a direct and urgent conversation with a disappearing horizon. As the water table retreated further underground during the long, dry seasons, the challenge was not to bring water from afar, but to follow it down. The engineers' response was an act of reverse architecture. They did not build up, they excavated down, carving a colossal, inverted temple into the very bones of the earth. This was a mastery of earth through subtraction on a breathtaking scale, creating stability in the form of a deep, sheltered void. But the true genius was in the descent. They lined the excavation with a symmetrical cascade of steps, transforming a simple well into a grand, accessible staircase. This design solved multiple problems with one graceful gesture. As the water level dropped, the steps provided continued access all the way to the receding pool, ensuring the community could reach its lifeblood year-round. The stepped walls also maximized the surface area for collection during the brief, intense monsoon rains, guiding every precious drop into the central reservoir. Yet the stepwell was far more than a utilitarian water source. Its deep, subterranean design harnessed the Earth's natural thermal mass. While the surface world baked under a relentless sun, the air at the bottom of the well remained cool and moist, a natural refuge from the heat. This made the baoli a vibrant social sanctuary. The landings and pavilions built into its sides became places for gathering, for conversation, for quiet contemplation. Often ornate pillars, carved deities, and shaded niches turned the structure into a de facto temple, a place where the act of drawing water was intertwined with spiritual practice and social connection. Here, the mastery of water, earth, and community space fused into a single, cohesive system. It managed scarcity not through force, but through invitation, creating a cool, subterranean oasis that served as reservoir, civic center, and sacred grotto all at once. The stepwell represents a philosophy of engineering where every element serves multiple, harmonious purposes, where the solution to a physical need blossoms into a space that nourishes the social and spiritual life of the people. It is a testament to the idea that the most profound designs do not conquer nature's challenges, but create a beautiful, enduring space within them. These monumental works did not spring from a single moment of inspiration. They were born from a quiet, relentless practice of watching and wondering. Long before the formal scientific method was given a name, the first engineers were its most devoted practitioners. Their laboratory was the world itself, and their experiments were etched into the landscape. Every structure that still stands is a testament to a profound, patient dialogue with nature, a conversation built on a foundation of meticulous observation. They did not have textbooks or instruments, but they possessed the most powerful tool of all, a deep and abiding curiosity about how things work. They watched how water, given a choice, always seeks the easiest path downhill, carving channels through soft soil and leaving harder stone untouched. They noticed how different types of earth behaved when wet, how some clays became sticky and strong, while sandy soils simply washed away. They felt how the wind changed direction around a hill or whistled through a narrow gap between rocks. These were not just passing observations, they were the raw data of survival. From this data, they began to form hypotheses. If water always finds the lowest point, could we dig a channel to guide it to our fields? If this clay holds together when packed, could we build a wall from it? Each attempt was an experiment. Some succeeded, and some failed spectacularly, a canal collapsing or a wall crumbling after a hard rain. But failure was not an end, it was a crucial piece of information. It told them what not to do, and more importantly, it forced them to ask why. This cycle of observation, trial, and adaptation was the true engine of progress. Knowledge was not held by a single person, but was a collective inheritance passed down through stories, through apprenticeship, and through the silent language of technique. A master builder did not just teach an apprentice how to lay bricks. He taught him how to read the soil, how to listen for the sound of a stable foundation, how to anticipate the push of the wind. This was tacit knowledge, a deep, practical wisdom that lived in the hands and the eyes, refined over generations. It was this accumulated, hard-won understanding that allowed them to scale their successes. A small terrace that worked on a family plot could be expanded to reshape an entire mountainside. A reliable well design could be replicated across a desert region. Their greatest innovations were not sudden leaps, but the final, confident steps in a very long walk of learning. The true genius of these early masters lay in their humility before the elements. They approached nature not as a foe to be conquered, but as a teacher with infinite lessons to offer. Every flood, every collapsed wall, every stubborn stone was a question posed by the world, and their enduring structures are the elegant, patient answers they discovered through a lifetime of careful listening. The gears were not meant to be seen by human eyes. For 2,000 years, they rested in the silent darkness of a shipwreck, a secret locked inside a lump of corroded bronze and stone. When divers finally recovered the strange mechanism from the waters near the Greek island of Antikythera in the early 20th century, they had no idea what they held. It was a collapsed, calcified mass, more artifact than machine. Only decades later, with the aid of advanced imaging, did the truth begin to emerge. This was not a statue or a piece of jewelry. It was a clockwork universe, an analog computer of staggering complexity, built in a time when such technology was thought impossible. Its very existence rewrites our understanding of ancient genius, revealing that the mastery of earth, water, and wind had paved the way for a final, breathtaking leap into the realm of pure abstract thought. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, is a compact universe of interlocking bronze gears, housed in a wooden case no larger than a shoebox. By turning a hand crank on the side, the user could set in motion a precise celestial ballet. Dozens of finely cut gears would rotate in concert, moving pointers across dials on the front and back to display the positions of the sun, the moon, and the known planets. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, track the cycles of the Olympic Games, and even account for the subtle wobble in the moon's orbit, a complexity modern astronomers call lunar anomaly. This was not magic, it was mathematics made physical. Someone, over 2 millennia ago, had taken the observed, predictable cycles of the heavens and translated them into a language of metal and tooth count. Each gear ratio was a frozen equation, a physical expression of a cosmic relationship. To build it required more than just astronomical knowledge. It demanded an unprecedented level of mechanical precision and metallurgical skill, a deep mastery over Earth's ores and the arts of the forge. Yet this intellectual pinnacle did not arise in a vacuum. It stands as the ultimate symbol of how physical mastery enables abstract discovery. The mechanism's gears are the direct descendants of the watermill's drivetrain and the windmill's translating works. Its bronze is the culmination of millennia spent learning to extract and alloy metals from stone, and its purpose speaks to the practical needs born from elemental mastery. While its exact use is debated, many scholars believe it was a sophisticated navigational aid and calendar. For a seafaring culture, the ability to predict the moon's phase and position was crucial for understanding tides, those vast, rhythmic breaths of the ocean governed by celestial gravity. It connected the wind in the sails to the pull of the moon, offering a predictive power over journeys across the water that was literally astronomical in scale. Here, the mastery of water and wind demanded a mastery of the sky itself, and the mechanism provided it, turning the cosmos into a tool. The Antikythera device represents a profound shift in the human relationship with nature. It is the moment observation became simulation, Our ancestors had long watched the cycles of seasons, stars, and tides, building their societies around these rhythms. But with this machine, they attempted to build a working model of those rhythms, to hold a miniature, mechanical cosmos in their hands. It was an attempt to not just live within nature's cycles, but to replicate its logic inside a human-made system. This leap from practical engineering to theoretical modeling is arguably one of the most significant in our intellectual history. It shows that the confidence gained from terracing hillsides, guiding rivers, and harnessing the wind fueled the ambition to understand and even mimic the grandest machinery of all, the movement of the heavens. The silent, turning gears of the Antikythera Mechanism are a whisper from the past, telling us that the journey to understand our world began not with telescopes and laboratories, but with mud bricks, irrigation ditches, and the patient, profound act of paying attention. The silent gears of the Antikythera Mechanism were a final, intricate proof of a deeper truth. Every structure, every machine, every city was ultimately a conversation with the substance of the world itself. The journey of mastery was not just about shaping earth, water, and wind. It was about transforming the very materials they provided into new forms of strength and permanence. This was the quiet revolution of material innovation, an elemental alchemy that began with the simplest of acts. The first builders worked with what they found, raw earth and stone. But they quickly learned that nature's gifts could be persuaded. They discovered that clay, when shaped and left to dry in the sun, became a hard adobe brick. But when that same clay was placed into the heart of a fire, something miraculous happened. The heat drove out the moisture and altered its very structure, turning soft mud into a hard, durable ceramic. This was the birth of pottery and fired brick, a material that could laugh at the rain and stand firm against the wind's constant push. It was humanity's first great act of material transformation, using fire, that fourth elemental force, to convince Earth to become something more resilient. This pursuit of strength led them deeper into the landscape, to seek out strange, colorful rocks that behaved unlike any stone. They found that certain greenish ores, when heated in a hot enough furnace with charcoal, would weep a glowing, liquid metal. This was the dawn of metallurgy, the smelting of copper. Here was a material that could be poured, hammered, and sharpened, a substance that took the stubbornness of stone and gave it a new, purposeful form. By alloying copper with tin, they created bronze, a metal even harder and more versatile, perfect for the chisels that carved temples and the tools that built empires. Each new material was a key that unlocked a new door of possibility. But perhaps no ancient innovation speaks to this transformative genius more clearly than Roman concrete. While others used simple lime mortar, Roman engineers made a discovery that seemed to defy logic. They mixed their lime with a fine, sandy ash from the volcanoes near the Bay of Naples, a material called pozzolana. When combined with water and aggregate, this mixture did not just dry. It underwent a chemical reaction that actually strengthened over time, even when completely submerged. This is why Roman harbors, piers, and aqueducts could be built directly in the sea, their concrete blocks growing harder as the centuries passed, literally turning the destructive power of water into a partner in their own curing process. This was material science at its most profound, a recipe that used the Earth's own fiery history to create a substance that could master its watery present. From fired clay to forged bronze to hydraulic concrete, this relentless innovation was always in service of a greater harmony. They were creating materials that could better withstand water's erosion, resist the wind's relentless force, and bear the immense weight of their ambitions. Each new substance was a step toward permanence, a way to ensure that the dialogues they had begun with the elements would not be erased by the next storm or the next generation. The monuments they left behind are not just made of stone or metal, they are made of transformed earth, a testament to the human ability to see potential in the raw stuff of the planet, and through patience and fire, help it fulfill a grander purpose. Sometimes the most profound strength comes from a delicate absence. In the high Andes, along the windswept coasts of Scotland, and across the sun-baked hills of the Mediterranean, ancient builders performed a quiet miracle of equilibrium. They constructed walls that have stood for centuries, even millennia, without a single drop of mortar, without any glue or cement to hold them together. This is the art of dry stone walling, a minimalist masterpiece where stability is born not from a binding agent, but from a deep, intuitive conversation with gravity itself. It is engineering reduced to its purest form, the patient placement of one stone upon another, where every choice is permanent and every mistake is written in a future collapse. The builder begins not with a pile of uniform bricks, but with a chaotic scatter of stones, each one a unique, irregular shape gifted by the earth. The master waller picks up a stone, turns it in their hands, feeling its weight and contours. They are not looking for a flat surface, they are searching for a puzzle piece. They need a stone whose underside will nestle perfectly into the hollow left by the two stones below it, and whose top will provide a stable cradle for the stone that comes next. This is a three-dimensional jigsaw played with pieces that weigh hundreds of pounds, where the only picture is a wall that must not fall. The genius of this method lies in its understanding of forces. A well-built dry stone wall is not a rigid monolith. It is designed to breathe, to flex. Each stone transfers its load diagonally downward through the wall, distributing weight across a broad base. The slight gaps and interlocking shapes allow the structure to shift minutely when the ground freezes and thaws, or when the tremors of an earthquake pass through it. Instead of cracking under the stress like a solid, mortared wall might, a dry stone wall simply settles, its stones whispering against one another as they find a new collective balance. This was not just fence building, it was applied geophysics. On the staggering slopes of the Andes, the Inca took this principle to its monumental extreme. At sites like Machu Picchu, they built retaining walls and agricultural terraces that have held back mountainsides for over 500 years. They selected hard granite stones and shaped them with such precision that the joints between them are often tighter than a razor blade. The walls curve and lean slightly inward, following the natural slope of the bedrock beneath, creating a seamless merger between the built environment and the living mountain. These terraces did more than prevent erosion. They created microclimates, capturing sun and water to grow crops at impossible altitudes, turning vertical cliffs into gardens of sustenance. In the Scottish Highlands, dry stone dikes crisscross the landscape like the seams of a giant's quilt. Built to clear fields of stone and to contain livestock, these walls tell a story of pragmatic adaptation. The builders used the stones at their feet, often laying them with two neat faces and a heart of smaller rubble. The walls were thick, low, and resilient, able to withstand the lashing rain and bitter cold of the North Atlantic weather. They were boundaries that blended into the land, becoming as much a part of the scenery as the hills themselves. This global practice reveals a universal truth about early engineering. The highest sophistication often looks like simplicity. It is the confidence to leave things out, to trust that nature's own laws of friction and gravity, when respected with enough care and observation, are the strongest glue of all. The dry stone wall is a testament to patience and perception, a lasting reminder that order can be assembled from chaos through nothing more than perfect, thoughtful placement. The moon's silent pull on the oceans offered a promise as reliable as the sunrise itself. While rivers could flood or dry up, and winds could fall still for days, the tides arrived and departed with a celestial certainty, a slow, massive breath of the entire sea. To harness this rhythm was to engage in a partnership not just with water, but with time and the cosmos. Along the sheltered estuaries and inlets of medieval Europe, particularly in Britain and France, engineers began to listen to this predictable pulse, and they built machines to answer it. These were the tidal mills, and their operation was a masterpiece of scheduled patience. The design was elegantly logical. Builders would construct a large dam or embankment across a tidal creek, creating a sizable reservoir known as a mill pond. In this dam, they installed a sturdy wooden sluice gate. Here is where the waiting began. As the incoming tide swelled, the gate would be left open, allowing seawater to flow freely into the pond, filling it to the brim. Then, at the precise moment of high tide, workers would shut the gate, locking an entire miniature sea inside the embankment. For hours, as the tide outside receded, the mill sat silent, holding its captured energy in check. Only when the water level in the estuary had fallen far below the level of the full pond would the gate be opened again. Now, the trapped seawater had only one way out, through a narrow channel that directed its flow squarely onto the blades of a large water wheel. The pent-up sea rushed out with focused force, turning the wheel, which drove the gears that ground grain into flour. This was power generation by appointment, a force that could be scheduled days or even years in advance, dictated by the lunar calendar. Building such a system required a deep, localized wisdom. Engineers needed intimate knowledge of their specific coastline, understanding not just the timing of the tides, but their range, how the shape of the estuary amplified or dampened the flow, and how storm surges could affect the system. The construction itself was a formidable challenge in marine engineering, using timber and stone to create gates and embankments that could withstand the constant, corrosive push of salt water and the tremendous pressure of a full tidal pond. This was not battling the sea, it was politely borrowing from its endless, rhythmic exchange. The tidal mill turned the moon's invisible gravitational tug into the very tangible work of feeding a community, a brilliant synchronization of human need with the oldest clock on Earth. A stone was never just a stone. To the hands that placed it, it held a presence, a story, a soul. The mastery of earth, water, and wind was never a cold, calculated science divorced from the world it sought to engage. For the ancient mind, the elements were alive, conscious forces with wills of their own. A river was not merely a flow of H2O, it was a god, a deity like Hapi in Egypt, whose annual flood brought both life and terrifying destruction, a power that had to be thanked, feared, and ritually appeased. The wind was not an atmospheric pressure differential. It was the breath of a spirit like the Greek anemoi, whose different directions carried distinct personalities and required respect. The earth itself was the ultimate mother, a sacred being from whom all life sprang and to whom all would eventually return. This world, you did not hinder engineering, it fueled it. It provided the profound why behind the immense how. When a community undertook a project that would demand generations of backbreaking labor, like carving a mountain into a temple or diverting an entire river, the motivation could not be purely utilitarian. It required a story, a shared belief that made the sacrifice meaningful. The pyramid was far more than a pharaoh's tomb. It was a resurrection machine, a meticulously angled ramp of stone designed to catapult the king's soul directly into the realm of the stars, aligning his journey with the cosmic cycles of the sun god Ra. Every block laid was an act of religious devotion, a prayer in granite. Similarly, the breathtaking stepwells of India were not just clever water reservoirs. They were offerings carved into the earth for the goddesses of water like Varuni. Their ornate, temple-like architecture transformed the practical act of drawing water into a spiritual pilgrimage, a descent into a cool, sacred underworld where the community gathered not just to collect, but to connect with the divine. This spiritual framework was the invisible mortar that held these monumental societies together. It provided the social cohesion, the collective purpose, that turned thousands of individuals into a single, focused workforce. The ritual that blessed the first stone of an aqueduct, the ceremony that asked permission from the forest spirits before felling trees for a ship, these were not superstitions. They were acknowledgements, they were ways of saying, we understand we are borrowing from forces greater than ourselves, and we do so with gratitude and reverence. This holistic approach meant that every engineering decision carried a double weight. A canal had to be hydrologically sound, yes, but it also had to be ritually pure, following paths that honored the land's spiritual geography. A city's layout, like those of the ancient Chinese, was often designed according to cosmological principles like Feng Shui, aligning streets and buildings with celestial and terrestrial energies to ensure harmony and prosperity. Their mastery sought not just physical control, but a deep, respectful equilibrium. They were not trying to conquer nature, but to converse with it, to integrate their human needs into a living, breathing, sacred order. This reminds us that the most enduring structures they left behind are not merely feats of technical skill. They are dialogues frozen in time between humanity and a world they perceived as wondrously, powerfully alive. That sacred conversation with a living world is a dialogue we are only now relearning. The most cutting-edge designs in sustainable architecture are not looking forward to some distant technological future. They are looking back, rediscovering the profound wisdom encoded in ancient stone and earth. The principles our ancestors mastered through necessity are experiencing a powerful renaissance, not as historical curiosities, but as vital blueprints for a resilient future. In a world grappling with the energy cost of modern construction, the humble rammed earth wall has become a symbol of elegant efficiency. Today's architects are reviving this technique, compressing local soil into massive sculptural forms. The result is a building with almost no embodied energy, meaning the energy required to create and transport its primary material is nearly zero. These walls do not need to be manufactured in a distant factory and shipped across continents. They rise from the very site they stand upon, and like their ancient counterparts, they provide exceptional thermal mass, naturally regulating indoor temperatures and slashing the need for heating and cooling systems. It is a full-circle return to building with the land itself. Similarly, the logic of the Persian wind catcher is being reborn in contemporary design. Architects are now creating buildings that breathe, using clever vent placement, thermal chimneys, and shaded courtyards to promote passive cooling. The goal is to invite the wind inside, to channel breezes and create convection currents that make mechanical air conditioning an occasional supplement rather than a constant, energy-hungry necessity. This is not about abandoning comfort, but about achieving it through intelligence rather than brute force, by designing with the climate as a partner. Our modern water crises are also prompting a look back at subterranean genius. In regions plagued by both drought and flooding, engineers are revisiting the Qanat's profound lesson that water is best managed where it is stored, in the ground itself. Modern groundwater recharge projects mimic this ancient logic. Instead of channeling all stormwater away through pipes to be lost, new systems are designed to let rainwater infiltrate, to sink back into the earth, replenishing aquifers and mimicking the natural water cycle the Qanat so elegantly harnessed. This ancient practice offers a powerful alternative to our often wasteful, use once and dispose water mentality. What does this revival tell us? It reveals that the mastery of those early engineers was not primitive. It was advanced in the most crucial sense, advanced in its sustainability. They worked within tight ecological budgets, using local materials and renewable energy flows long before those were buzzwords. Their legacy challenges the very core of our modern high-energy solutions, asking us a poignant question. Have we, in our quest to dominate nature with technology, forgotten how to cooperate with it? Their work stands as a timeless lesson in resilience, proving that the most enduring systems are those that listen to the world and find a way to integrate human need into its existing rhythms. This is not a call to abandon modern innovation, but to temper it with ancient insight to build a future that is not just smart but wise. Even the desert could be made to hold a winter's chill. In the blistering heart of the Persian plateau, where summer heat could turn day into a furnace, engineers performed a feat that seemed to defy the very climate. They built reservoirs for cold, massive, dome-shaped structures called yachtals, where ice could survive not just through a single season, but remain solid through the entire scorching year. This was not magic, it was a meticulous orchestration of all three elements, a final exam in integrated mastery where earth, wind, and water were each given a specific, vital role. The process began with the collection of the ice itself. During the frigid winter months, teams would channel water into shallow, shaded ponds where it would freeze overnight. Sometimes ice was even quarried from nearby mountains and transported with great care to the site. But gathering the ice was the easy part. The true genius was in convincing it to stay. The yacht's design was a masterpiece of passive thermodynamics. Its most visible feature was a massive, conical dome, often reaching 60 feet high, built from a special, heat-resistant mortar called sarouge. This dome was not solid but hollow, rising over a deep, subterranean storage pit. The thick earthen walls surrounding this pit provided the first line of defense, using the Earth's natural insulating properties to buffer the inner chamber from the desert's radiant heat. But insulation alone was not enough to combat the slow, relentless seep of warmth. Here, the engineers called upon the wind. They incorporated Badgirs, the very same wind-catching towers used for cooling homes, directly into the yacht's structure. These towers would capture the cooler night breezes and any prevailing wind, funneling it down into the depths of the storage pit. As this air descended, it would pass over the stacked blocks of ice, absorbing their chill before being vented out through other openings, creating a continuous, natural circulation that actively removed warm air and maintained a frigid microclimate. The final, most subtle layer of mastery involved the water itself, or more precisely, its phase change. The engineers understood that melting ice absorbs a tremendous amount of heat from its surroundings, a principle we now call latent heat of fusion. The very act of the ice slowly melting at a carefully managed rate consumed the ambient warmth that seeped into the chamber, helping to keep the remaining ice core at a stable, freezing temperature. They managed this process with drains and collection systems for the meltwater, which itself was valuable, cool drinking water. The result was nothing short of revolutionary for daily life. A community with a yachtl possessed a year-round treasure. They could preserve meat, dairy, and fruits far beyond their normal season. They could make chilled desserts and refreshing drinks, turning sustenance into pleasure even in the most extreme heat. This was not merely a luxury, it was a profound expansion of security and well-being. The yachtl stands as a quiet monument to a holistic vision of engineering, where every material and every natural force was part of a single, elegant equation for survival. It asked the earth to insulate, the wind to circulate, and the water to remember its winter form, proving that even in the absence of modern technology, human ingenuity could craft a pocket of perpetual winter in the middle of a summer world. Yet for all we have uncovered, the past keeps its most intimate conversations to itself. We stand before monuments like the towering stone platform at Baalbek in Lebanon, and our modern confidence wavers. Here, three colossal blocks, each weighing nearly 800 tons, rest side by side. They are the heaviest known stones ever moved by human hands in the ancient world. We can theorize about earthen ramps and teams of thousands, but the sheer, staggering scale of the operation defies our easy reconstruction. How did they quarry these behemoths from the bedrock a mile away? How did they transport them across uneven ground and then lift them precisely into place, over 20 feet in the air? The local Roman temples built atop this platform are marvels in their own right, yet they feel almost lightweight compared to the silent, incomprehensible foundation they stand upon. It is a puzzle without a manual, a feat that whispers of a logistical and social organization so complete, its details have vanished into time. Equally enigmatic are the vast geoglyphs etched across the arid plains of Nazca, Peru. From the ground, they are meaningless scrapes in the desert pavement, but from the air, they resolve into perfect geometric shapes and elaborate depictions of animals and plants, some stretching over 600 feet. The how of their creation is, in many ways, simple to understand. The Nazca people removed the dark, sun-baked stones from the surface, exposing the lighter soil beneath to create lines of stunning contrast. But the why and the precise how of their design remains one of archaeology's great riddles. Without a written record, we are left to interpret their purpose. Were they ritual pathways, a celestial calendar mapped onto the earth, or offerings to deities believed to reside in the sky? The most compelling mysteries are not about the physical act, but about the knowledge that guided it. To create such precise, large-scale figures without an aerial view suggests a mastery of geometry and surveying that we are still piecing together. It implies a shared vision so clear that generations could contribute to a design they would never see in its entirety. This is the enduring challenge of ancient engineering. For every aqueduct whose slope we can measure, for every dry stone wall whose physics we can model, there exists a technique that left no blueprint. The absence of written manuals means we are often reverse engineering genius, working backward from the finished product to deduce the thought process. We see the result, the perfect joint, the aligned star shaft, the city that defies flooding, and we must reconstruct the countless trials, errors, and flashes of insight that led to it. This process of deduction is itself a form of dialogue. Modern materials scientists study Roman concrete to uncover its self-healing properties. Engineers model the acoustics of ancient amphitheaters to understand how sound was projected without amplification. Each investigation is an attempt to listen in on a conversation that ended centuries ago. These gaps in our knowledge are not failures of history, but invitations. They remind us that mastery is not a static set of answers, but a living process of inquiry. The fact that we still debate the methods behind the pyramids or the purpose of Stonehenge means the work of those ancient engineers is not finished. Their creations continue to teach, to provoke, and to challenge our assumptions. Perhaps they employed a forgotten technique, a clever use of leverage or water that we have overlooked. Or perhaps their greatest insight was a holistic understanding of their environment that we, in our age of specialization, are only now relearning to see. The silence in the historical record keeps the conversation alive, a timeless exchange between their silent, stone questions and our restless, modern search for answers. Sometimes the most fertile ground must be built by hand. In the dense, swampy lowlands of the ancient Maya world, a landscape that might appear to us as a tangled, waterlogged obstacle was seen as an opportunity. Here, where seasonal floods could drown crops and dry spells could parch the soil, Maya engineers performed a kind of alchemy. They did not drain the swamps to create farmland. They transformed the swamps into a different kind of farmland entirely, one that worked in concert with the water. Their invention was the chinampa, often called a floating garden, though it was anything but a drift. It was a masterpiece of deliberate, aquatic earthworks. The process began with the water itself. In the shallow lake beds and marshy areas, workers would dredge up the rich, dark muck from the bottom, a sediment teeming with decomposed organic matter. They piled this nutrient-dense material into long, rectangular mounds, building them up until they stood just above the waterline. These were not isolated plots, but part of a vast, grid-like network. Each raised bed was bordered by the very canals from which its soil had been taken. creating a permanent, navigable waterway on all sides. This simple act of moving earth from below the water to above it solved multiple problems with one elegant stroke. The canals provided constant passive irrigation, their moisture seeping into the planting beds through capillary action, ensuring roots never dried out. In the cool season, the water acted as a thermal mass, absorbing warmth during the day and radiating it back at night, protecting tender plants from unexpected frosts. And because the canals were constantly replenished with decaying vegetation and nutrient-rich runoff, they created a self-renewing fertilizer system. When the time came to revitalize a chinampa bed, farmers simply dredged a little more of this fertile muck from the canal and spread it on top, a continuous cycle of renewal. This was not just farming, it was managed wetland ecology on a grand scale. The Maya had mastered the dynamic interface between earth and water, turning a challenging, humid environment into a hyper-productive, self-sustaining agricultural engine. The chinampas were biodiversity hotspots, attracting fish and waterfowl, which provided additional food sources, while the willow trees planted along the edges stabilized the banks with their roots and provided living fence posts. This bioengineering approach supported astonishing population densities, allowing cities like the great metropolis of Tikal to thrive deep in the rainforest for centuries, fed by these verdant, aquatic grids. The chinampa stands as a profound lesson in working within an ecosystem rather than against it, a reminder that sometimes abundance is not found by conquering a landscape, but by learning to build gently upon its own hidden logic. A single stone could not build a pyramid. The true foundation of every ancient wonder was not granite or limestone, but something far more complex, the coordinated will of thousands. The mastery of earth, water, and wind was ultimately a mastery of people, a monumental exercise in social engineering that transformed human energy into a tangible, world-altering force. Before a single block was quarried or a canal dug, a society had to answer a profound question: how do we organize ourselves to do the impossible? This required systems of order so sophisticated they became the invisible architecture upon which all physical structures rose. Standardized measures were among the first and most crucial innovations. A cubit in Egypt, a foot in Rome. These were not arbitrary lengths. They were social contracts made physical, a shared language of dimension that allowed a master builder on one side of a project to communicate precise specifications to a stonecutter on the other, miles away. Without this common tongue, chaos would reign and no two blocks would ever fit together. Specialization followed naturally. Grand projects created a society of experts, not just laborers. There were quarrymen who understood the grain of stone, ramp engineers who calculated slopes, mortar mixers who guarded secret recipes, and surveyors who could draw a true line to the horizon. Each person became a vital cog in a machine far greater than themselves, their individual skill amplified by the collective effort. Yet feeding, housing, and motivating this army was a logistical puzzle as daunting as any hydraulic system. Administrators had to plan supply chains for grain and water that stretched across deserts, establish camps with sanitation, and manage a rhythm of work that balanced immense effort with necessary rest. This was human resource management on a colossal scale, ensuring the workforce itself did not collapse under the weight of its own task. At the heart of it all was a system of command, a hierarchy that translated visionary goals into daily instructions. Whether it was the overseers of a pharaoh, the magistrates of a Roman province, or the council of elders in a Mesopotamian city, this structure provided direction and resolution. It settled disputes over resources, allocated tasks, and maintained the unwavering focus required for projects that spanned decades or even generations. This aspect of mastery reveals a stunning truth. Early engineering was not the lonely pursuit of genius inventors. It was a societal endeavor, a triumph of coordinated will. The process of moving mountains literally forged the social bonds and political structures of the civilization itself. The shared identity of being Egyptian was cemented as much by the collective sweat poured into a royal tomb as by any shared language or god. The authority of a ruler was proven not just by proclamation, but by their ability to marshal and sustain such world-shaping labor. In shaping the physical world, they were also sculpting their own social reality, creating hierarchies, professions, and a shared sense of monumental purpose that defined their culture for centuries. The greatest structures they left behind, therefore, are not just testaments to their understanding of physics, but to their profound understanding of each other. The rammed earth walls of the first villages still whisper their lessons, from those humble beginnings to the wind-powered voyages that charted continents. This journey reveals a single, profound truth about our species. The story of early engineering is not a chronicle of conquest, but a testament to profound creativity and resilience. These pioneers looked upon the chaotic, raw forces of earth, water, and wind and saw not just obstacles to overcome, but potential partners in a grand, collaborative dance. Their mastery was never a sudden flash of genius. It was a patient craft born from generations of quiet observation, from countless experiments etched into the landscape itself, and from a deep cultural wisdom that wove practical need with spiritual meaning. They did not seek to dominate the elements, but to understand their language, to learn their rhythms, and to build within the spaces those rhythms allowed. In doing so, they laid the very foundational stones upon which all civilization would rise. Their aqueducts and terraces, their windmills and stepwells were more than just tools for survival. They were physical manifestations of a harmonious dialogue with a living world. Today, as we navigate our own complex environmental challenges, from shifting climates to resource scarcity, their legacy resonates with urgent relevance. It offers us powerful, timeless lessons in sustainability and graceful adaptation. They teach us that efficiency can be found in working with natural forces rather than constantly fighting against them with ever greater energy inputs. They remind us that the most resilient systems are often decentralized, local, and built from materials the land itself provides. Their greatest gift to us may be a philosophical blueprint, a model for harmonious living that sees the planet not as a warehouse to be plundered, but as a partner in a shared, enduring future. Let their quiet ingenuity inspire our own. As we look toward tomorrow's cities and technologies, may we build with the same spirit of balance and deep respect for the elemental forces that sustain all life. Their conversation with the world lasted for millennia. It is a conversation we must choose to continue. Which of these ancient techniques do you find most astonishing or relevant for our time? Was it the subterranean genius of the Qanat, the celestial mechanics of the Antikythera device, or the communal spirit of the Chinampa? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to journey deeper into the mysteries of how our ancestors shaped the world, subscribe for more explorations into the forgotten wisdom of our past.